Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people and wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you could be thinking about experimenting differently. Join us on the Experimental Leader podcast and take a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own lives. Hosted by Melanie Parrish and Mel Rutherford, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something more innovative. Join us on the Experimental Leader podcast today.
Hello, and welcome to the Experimental Leader podcast. I'm Melanie Parrish.
Hi, I'm Mel Rutherford.
It's great to be here with you today. I'm an executive coach. I work a lot in tech, and I really focus on helping people with leadership.
I'm an academic. I'm an experimental psychologist, and I'm McMaster University's first transgender department chair.
It's great to be here with you today. And I have been thinking about my own leadership, and every time I throw a barbecue, it makes me think about bottlenecks. It is, of all the cooking things, it's the thing that brings bottlenecks to mind. And Mel and I threw a party on Friday, and we were serving pupusas of all things, and we sort of grilled them up on the barbecue. And we had 40 people, and we could feed the first half of them with the first round of pupusas. But then there was a line, and I knew that the bottleneck for feeding the rest of the people was the grill. And there was nothing I could do about it. I just had to keep cooking the pupusas so people would come and be like, oh, how long till more food? And I was like, oh, I know exactly where the bottleneck is. It's the cooking of the pupusas, and it's going to be 5 minutes, and you might as well go walk around, get a drink, talk to people, come back in 5 minutes. And it reminds me in leadership about sort of how there's bottlenecks and how they have a time of their own. Also, just like how there's only one bottleneck in like our serving line. It didn't matter how much sour cream there was. It didn't matter how many beans, how much beans and rice there was. It was only the pupusas that were on the grill that were the bottleneck. No matter how fast we could serve everything else, there was, the line wasn't going to move until we had the main dish, which was the pupusa, which if you don't know what a pupusa is, it's a little like packet. It's like a little flour. It's all kind of looks like a tortilla on the outside, but it's a double-sided tortilla with stuffing. And we're all vegetarian. So they had beans and zucchini and cheese in them. And they are delicious with salsa on top. If you haven't had them, you should find them in your life. Anyway, so my leadership challenge to you is find the one bottleneck in the work that you're doing and put all your attention on it. It's amazing what can happen if you focus on your bottleneck.
Cool. I was thinking about self-actualizing. I was thinking about the idea that as a leader, like a really aspirational leadership goal is to create a culture where everyone can self-actualize, everyone can be the best they can be at work. Everyone can really sort of dig into their vision of what they thought they were getting into this career for in the first place. And that got me to thinking about...
Wait. Can you define self-actualization? Because I think you know what it is, but I'm not sure I do.
It's like that, finding that pinnacle of fulfillment, of living your goal, living your dream. And so I realized that in order to let your employees get to that place of self-actualization, you need to allow them to experiment. And allowing your employees to experiment means allowing your employees to fail. And I think that's kind of, as a leader, I think that's the hard part to, if someone comes to you and says, I want to try this new process, and you're thinking that's kind of might not work, but yeah, go ahead and try it. And then you support them to make it in order to make it the best experiment possible. You have to support them, give them the support they need, and it's going to work out or it's not going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, you've both learned something.
I'm just curious if like, what are the things you say to them or ask them when they fail?
Well, the conversation tends to be about learning. So, what did we think was going to happen? What happened? What could be different in the future? Do we need a big change or do we need a little change? Sometimes it's just more information that you need. So it's about improvement and learning.
Well, and I actually have an experiment kata in my book, and it's we actually have a free one to give out, which asks a lot of those questions. It's funny that you ask those questions. I love that. So if you want to email Melanie at experimentalleader.com, I'm happy to send you an experiment kata with some of those questions on it, so that you can ask those questions when your employees fail or experiment. To take them to the next level. Because I think the next level, the second time they experiment, like to take them to the second experiment, that's where it gets exciting. Is after they fail the first time, now what? Like, what did they learn? I love that place. And I am super excited about our guest today. Our guest, Hannah Howard, brings over 15 years of customer service leadership experience in technology-driven environments. She's been a driving force in creating high-performing teams and boosting customer engagement with increasing revenues. She has a background in spanning program development, change expertise, and a knack for cross-functional teamwork. Hannah's insights are bound to be gold for our viewers and listeners. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Hi, thanks you for having me.
Hi, Hannah.
I'd love to ask you what you're thinking about, how you're experimenting in your life and leadership right now.
What am I thinking about? A lot of process improvements, but which lends itself to both of the things that you guys were both talking about. If I only had one bottleneck to work through, that would be wonderful. There's several for a variety of different projects and things that are happening at the moment. But working with differing degrees of managers of their experience and seeing some of their, figuring out what amount of space to give each of them in their different levels to self-actualize, to run some of those kinds of understandings and experiments themselves and reflect and iterate on those things is interesting too. Yeah. So process improvement, it really on our side, I think, trying to work out how we can better share information around chronic problems, incident management. How do we manage those things and prevent them from recurring on an ongoing basis? What are the right processes around that? Has been a hot topic in the past week or so for us.
And I'm always curious. So it's always, I have more of a laboratory, I get to think more theoretically about leading things like process improvement and all of those things. But I'm always curious how people run, how they keep track of several employees running multiple experiments over time. And I'm guessing you might have some insight into that.
Well, we have a number of different tools that we can use, and we sort of take it in turns as to what the flavor of the month is. But realistically, at CSI, we tend to default to using Smartsheet a lot, or Microsoft tools. So Microsoft Planner we use a lot as well. So they're the two things. So across my team, we're currently tracking a number of different initiatives. Some of them are how do we continue to improve the ways that we are working together across different business lines. How do we share some of that knowledge and improve some of those things? And that's kind of run. It's not a project plan. It's not a Kanban board. It could be a Kanban board. But it's just a task tracker. And then we review that on a bi-weekly basis currently, because I come from a project management background, but my managers don't. So trying to kind of bring them along on a little bit of that journey as well.
Would the tool change depending on complexity or the length of the project?
Probably, and it depends on so two examples. So for that, it's a bit more project based, so it kind of makes sense to have it have the ability to work out of something that could be like a project plan or a smart sheet or an Excel, or and flip it to have cards and things, because that's an easy filter within that product. If they're chronic problems, we have another meeting that we look at across things, and that's where we use Microsoft Planner, because that is just really using cards, just like a Kanban board. We can work through them. We can provide quick, brief updates, a quick summary of what the current status and what the solution might be. But really, a lot of the work and the discussion and the resolution has happened elsewhere. But otherwise, often that's about reporting out, where are we at with this particular fix, whether it's a process change or a development change, or just a customer service change. We need to address something in the contract. All of that is happening in myriad other places. But this is sharing that information and making sure we've got awareness across the customer base and those who are working with that shared customer base.
I'm so aware in our business. We use Kanban boards. We have Kanban boards, and we've used them.
Yeah.
And we still kind of use them, and they become sort of these repositories.
Yep.
Our actual work is, in the calendar, because I see clients, I do client work. So I still find it quite challenging. And then when I try new tools, I get pushback, because it's like, oh, why are you trying another tool? We have so many tools that we aren't using. Yeah. And so I just always find it really interesting to talk about tools a little bit. And then we have tools that sit there, like we use Miro to hold some things. We hold, and then of course, we use Google Sheets and Docs a lot in Kanban to hold. I always find it so interesting how people make the work visible. We don't use Microsoft, so that's a tool that's not available to us. At this point.
Yeah, well, it's funny because all of the customer support reps are working out of we use Microsoft CRM for that, fairly heavily customized for a lot of things, for working through all of the cases. That doesn't have a direct correlation, and one of the challenges that we've been trying to work through is when there is a customer impact and we've got multiple sets of cases, how do we correlate that level of impact and that number of cases back to a particular incident that we want to escalate and review with our executive leadership, so that they are aware of this amount of customer impact, and we can take action so that we don't have any kind of recurrences or similar events, because we can quantify and report out that this caused this level of issue management. And that's something that those things don't quite talk to each other, because it's many to one, and trying to map that right now is something we're trying to work out. So
I know there's so much technology, and it's so interesting how it's the flow of work.
Yeah.
We always go back to the flow of work. How can you make work visible? Like, it's the same principle that's hard to do, because each business is so unique and has its own needs. So it's hard to find the thing. I'm guessing academia has its own similar concerns.
Well, I was thinking in my context, one of the puzzles is, should the decisions about the tools come from the top or from the bottom? Because there's an efficiency to having, so if I'm the leader of the lab, I tell everyone in the lab what we're going to use, but we probably miss some opportunities, because the students in the lab are younger and probably know what's up and coming and know what's new, and so to listen to them about what they find effective, that's an opportunity for us too. So I don't know where the decision should come from.
Yeah, I'm not certain. Certain decisions are made for us in our context around it. We use a lot of Microsoft, therefore Microsoft CRM is the right way for our case management tool for issues. Is it the best solution for managing customer support and customer service and all of those things, issues? There are other products out there, I will say that, but it works, and we've got expertise within the organization to do that. So I think sometimes you're hemmed in around some of that kind of infrastructure or resources that are already available that kind of make some decisions. We're currently looking at updating or updating our phone system. So how do we bring in and facilitate all of the different ways that our customers interact with us on the phone? We have several different business lines to feed off and several ways of going to market there. So in some cases, we're providing effectively a white labeled call center function. In other cases, we're supporting a kind of a set customer base who are specific around core banking, and then we've got several other groups who I look after who are all a little bit more disparate and interact with customers in different ways, mostly via email, but still there's calls that come in and they need to be able to contact us. So we're trying to map out all of that and effectively modernize that phone system. And that decision has come from leadership, but at the director level versus above, because we know we need to do something to address several areas, and by doing it, it's going to help us all align and become more functional together rather than have these disparate teams who are working in different pockets of the organization doing effectively the same thing.
Well, and I think I have an opinion as a coach in that the best program is one that people use.
Yep, I would agree.
Because non-compliance is the biggest problem, like trying to get uptake on a new tool, then it's really not useful. If not, everyone will use it in an organization. Academia is different because there's different projects, there's different publications. It's not, you don't need uniformity as much as you need function. So you may actually be speaking to your environment. I think some of the, compliance to the tool is one of the biggest challenges leaders face in trying to get people to actually just make, like a Kanban board makes the work visible. Mm-hmm. And if you're not putting the work in the Kanban board, then the work is invisible. And that's what they try to solve. And if you don't use the board, the work remains invisible. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've talked about tools probably a little long.
But that's a great point. That exact last bit that you were saying, if you don't put the work out there, it's not visible. The conversation I had this morning with a group of people was around, we need a separate meeting because our work is not visible on this board. But the problem is we're not putting the work on the board to be visible, to have appropriate representation to talk about it. So it seems like there's a fairly easy solution there of sharing and making things visible and then inviting people to talk about things to the forum that is available to them.
And I've also found it effective to just call a meeting where everybody spends their time updating the board. And then they realize updating the board is important and they can't go anywhere else because they're on, they're there, have their cameras on, update the board until it's, you can have the meeting. We're going to stay until we can have the meeting we were here to do. And really, it's not that usually that many cards to update what's going on.
Right.
And then you have a functional board again. Well, I want to do like a whole twist around, talk about a different topic thing. I happen to know that both of you transitioned in your jobs, in your current jobs, I think. Did you transition in your current job, Hannah?
Effectively, yes.
So I am super curious about this because, I know Mel and I know he transitioned, but I'd love to have just a conversation about that. Like what went well, what was hard, anything you're willing to share. Because I think, this is obviously a topic near and dear to my heart and near and dear to your hearts. What wisdom do you have to impart about this?
So from my perspective, it was, I guess my approach to anything was I was slowly feeling out how I wanted to present in the world initially. So my transition went something along the lines of started socially sharing and being visible in 2018 and got to 2019. And I knew that I'd need to at some point communicate things at work because, physically you're evolving and there's changes that are becoming quite apparent. I think a lot of my co-workers who I was working with a smaller group at CSI at the time, but they just kind of made some assumptions about my sexuality, which was fine. But it got to a point in 2019 when it made sense, and I'd already communicated with my boss and with HR and kind of just worked through what logically needed to happen, and they were very accepting and supportive, and kind of gave me some guidance and said, whenever you're ready to be able to communicate and share whatever you need to, we're here to be able to facilitate that. So it was very easy for me. It was as simple as basically talking, having those initial conversations, setting that kind of timeline, and talking it through with HR, and then communicating, which I did. Sent that out to the group of people who I worked with in office at the time, and that was it. So I sent an email on a Monday, and then Tuesday had people immediately start using some new pronouns, or apologizing when using previous pronouns, which was, to me, very entertaining, because that's the approach that I take to life. But it was fairly straightforward. So over that next 9 months, it was 2019, so we were all in office, and that was fine. And then I changed my name formally, properly, after going by a nickname for about 9 months. And then we weren't in offices anymore in 2020. So, I had a year of that. And we don't have an office in Charlotte anymore, where I am. So it makes my life slightly different anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I had my stories similar, and the wisdom that I would share is think about who you're going to tell, and what I would say you don't want to do is just tell a couple people and then tell them to keep it secret, and then tell a couple more people and tell them to keep it secret. I think so. What I did was I had a conversation with my boss, and then I had a conversation with my students, and then I sent an email to everyone in the department so that everyone learned at the same time, and that we didn't have people who were keeping secrets from some people were in the know and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I did some of that groundwork.
You always get somebody who says, well, why didn't you tell me before? And you're like, well, I'm just starting to tell people. So when did you want me to tell you? But yeah, I think that telling the entire community at the same time is helpful. It doesn't make people feel like they're left out, or
I don't know if this happened for you, but the feedback that I got, it was fascinating. There was a lot of the kind of great, thanks for sharing, people who didn't necessarily acknowledge in any way, and that's totally fine. But the handful of people who came and shared something personal about themselves, or about their history, or about a family member, was an unexpected consequence for me. But it was, it's very rewarding that people felt that was an inflection point for them to be able to come and feel that was, take advantage of that moment of vulnerability, I guess, and share.
Yeah, that's cool. My favorite reaction was a friend of ours who hadn't seen me in a while, and then saw me as I was transitioning, and she looked at me and she said, "It suits you." I liked that.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite things that Mel didn't do is he didn't make a big production of telling the neighbors. And so, we weren't particularly close to the neighbors, and I don't know what he was going to say. Like, we didn't tell them anything else about our lives, so it kind of made sense.
Yeah.
But it was just funny. We were on sabbatical when he transitioned in another, we were in the States. And so we came home, and I don't know, it was comical. And I always had the perspective of the whole thing of, if somebody is going to be uncomfortable about the whole thing, it's fine if it's not me. Because I hate coming out. So I just let other people be uncomfortable sometimes. It was super apparent what he did, and it was just funny. And then the other funny thing about Mel's transition is when Mel transitioned, he looked like a young Johnny Depp or something. And so the women in his office were Twitter-pated over him, and really in inappropriate ways. And at our church, they were totally Twitter-pated and said inappropriate things, and couldn't catch their breath and stuff. And it was so weird for me because they were like that way about my husband. And that was all very weird, but in a good way, kind of like they liked him. They weren't being mean to him. So that was good, but that was all happening also. Do you want to tell the car story? That car.
What?
You might have stories like this too.
Well, yeah. Shortly after I transitioned, we were going to we were part of a church community, and we'd been part of this church community at that point for probably 8-9 years. So everybody knew me. But then, here I'm coming to church and having recently transitioned. And right after church, this woman came up to me and she said, "My car's not starting. Can you come see if you can start my car?" And I'm thinking, why in the world would I know how to start your car if you don't?
Well, she actually said, and I said, "Well, I'm pretty good mechanically." And she said, "I just need a man."
Well, that's validating.
So funny.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah. No, I can't think of anything like that. I mean, there's just the general interactions of, there's been some changes, kind of feedback for people. There was, I mean, so I have two kids. They're 11 and 9 now, but they were a little bit younger. So we were taking them to swim lessons, and the swim instructors were generally students. And so I've got this evolving appearance over a couple of years that the swim instructors are taking notice of, but no one's really commenting. And the other parents who are sitting and watching are just like, kind of reaction. So you don't make lots of parent friends when you're going through that moment in time, unless people want to specifically kind of do that. But the swim instructors would kind of stop by, a couple of them, and say, "Can I just say, I think you're really cool, and it's really great that you're visible." And that was very nice. And a couple of them sort of called that out. And I knew a couple of them were on different kind of, non-binary identities and other things happening there. So that it was just a nice feedback point.
When did you transition, Hannah?
So 2018, 2019. 2019 okay. Everywhere, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so it hasn't been that long. And Mel, when did you transition?
So it was 2008, mm-hmm. And one of the things that I noticed happened after I transitioned is I did have a number of students and other people come seek me out because they wanted to talk about their own gender and their own gender identity, and so because I was visible and public, they could find me and they could come have that conversation with me.
Yeah. The visibility thing's interesting because I'm currently, and this will evolve, but I work with a larger group of people. So some people aren't aware and weren't there at 2019 when they weren't working with that particular group who had that communication. So they have no clue what my historical background is. And that's fine by me. But at the same time, I'm not hiding anything. It just doesn't really come up, So it's a nice place to be. Our employee resource group that we have around LGBTQ identities is relatively small. But I play a role in that to try and move that forward, and have been trying to work as we've adopted and pushed forward more diversity, inclusion, equality initiatives with CSI in the past couple of years too. So it's an interesting state to be in. That's all.
Yeah, it's. I think that there's a real richness to this journey. I think it's brought a lot of richness to my life, even though I'm on the sidelines. We have a lot of people who sort of drop by with their, trans kids, which I enjoy that journey as well. And so I feel like, it's sort of a privileged place we sit with people as they're contemplating transition or that liminal space.
I fully expect to have some awareness as my 11-year-old just started middle school. There's going to be a little bit more of evolution of some of his friends and people becoming more aware of things. So I'm sure that if he is capable of communicating that I exist, he was doing some homework last night and he happily forgot that I existed when writing about his family. So yeah, then I'm sure there will be similar kind of conversations with, or that window into other kids' lives and be there as a resource.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what do your kids call you?
It varies. They currently call me at home. They've never moved beyond dad, which isn't my favorite. And we've communicated about this. Now their other mom, reinforces that, which isn't super helpful. She's very supportive of me otherwise. That's the one thing that she's kind of protective about, and I kind of get it. But the boys and I have had a number of conversations and they just haven't really settled on another word, but they have an interesting mentality around it. You're a mom that we happen to call dad because we haven't figured out a different word and we're not really supposed to use a different word, is how they respond to it. And they also kind of go with, but when we're in public, unless I'm in the store and we just can't remember or think about things, if we're at the pool, then we'll use the right word. We'll call you mom. That's fine. So there's like some kind of intricate maze in their heads. I'm sure that this will evolve. I'm just kind of letting them figure it out, really.
It's funny because my daughter is older than our kids and she's from a previous marriage, and she always called Mel teddy bear. And so then our sons that we have together called Mel Teddy before he transitioned. And then, I don't know, they just like spontaneously started calling you daddy after you transitioned. Like, people would say, oh, is that your daddy? Yeah. And then they're like, yeah. And then they just switched like seamlessly. And we felt like dad wasn't safe before he transitioned in public, like in that public arena, which I think is really interesting to notice. And then they just switched, and then they've never called you Teddy after that, right?
No.
It was super organic and kind of weird how they just did it. And we didn't say anything. We just went with it because it was kind of what he wanted, but weird.
But that's what it, as much as I don't love it, like there is a little part of my brain that kind of thinks it's kind of fun when they will call me dad in a grocery store, and if someone's overhearing it, their brain will just kind of go, if they're picking up on it. But people really aren't listening to most of our outside conversations. They really don't care or notice. So I've never really seen anyone pick up on that. It just doesn't bother me that much. It does a bit, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think that stuff is really interesting too, around just twisting things a little, like what families believe is normal.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course the other big update is the pronouns, and I've found in my workplace, different people have different sort of capacities to update their pronouns. Some people stumble a lot more than others, and you looking at me, you're not going to believe this, but just yesterday I was misgendered because some people, like, it just, they have, they've known me forever and have a hard time picking the right pronoun.
Yeah, it does take, it's hardwired for some people. I think that at work, I think there's about one person left who would potentially use the wrong pronoun. But what really helped in my situation was I moved to more of a nickname that I'd kind of was more feminine for that period, and then changed my name to Hannah. And I think after that, really everyone kind of went, oh, right, yeah, it's reinforced in some way. Yeah. I don't know. And again, it's the sort of thing, these are the things that we as trans individuals, I think you have to insulate your own brain from worrying about, because we can't control what other people do or think.
And to be fair, when I transitioned, I didn't have to change any pronouns. It's people who are talking about me who have to change pronouns.
Yeah.
I have another question, because I think both of you identify as trans. Is that true?
Yeah.
There's this sort of movement toward non-binary. There's this trying to create an overarching category. How do you think about that or feel about that? What's it like?
So my approach, and when I came out publicly at work, it was I identify more femininely and a more feminine non-binary identity, and use the pronouns she or they is perfectly acceptable to me. Of course, I live in North Carolina, so everybody read that in the office as, okay, she's now a girl or a woman, and we should therefore just use she all of the time, and that's it. And there was no non-binary-ness, because several weeks before that, I could hear the conversations about, I don't understand non-binary identities, in the office next door. So I was doing a little bit of education through that as well. What I found, because that was the reason I came out that way, was because that was more comfortable for me to kind of run that experiment of what's acceptable, how far do I want to go with this, what do I need to do to exist, and where does my identity land. Fairly quickly, with getting that kind of reinforcement back of, that's probably where I wanted to land anyway, on the trans feminine spectrum of identifying really as a trans woman, and just being accepted by society. I think it was a staging post on my journey, as it were, to use that identity, and it was valid at the time. And some people will stay there because that's the right thing. I do think that all trans people are in some way non-binary, because really what we're saying is there's a binary and there's something outside of that. And so if we transition, we are something outside of that, because we've gone on a journey to from one to the other. So I kind of think it's healthy in that respect. I'm not sure everyone else thinks about it that way, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, I think the community is broad enough to accept all. I was having a conversation this morning with a student who was making a distinction between binary trans people and non-binary trans people. Yeah. And I think the community, like, it's all part of the conversation, and this is all included in our community. So, I'm comfortable with all of that.
Yep.
Well, Hannah, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I think it's HL Howard at LinkedIn. So yeah.
Great. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Such interesting, rich conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks.
If you'd like to get a digital copy of my book, The Experimental Leader, Be a New Kind of Boss to Cultivate an Organization of Innovators, you can go to www.book.experimentalleader.com, and you can get your very own copy for just $4.95. I want this book in your hands, so I've made it really cost effective so that you can start reading it right away. Go now so you can get started today and start to systematically improve your own leadership.
Hey, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
That's really interesting. Just looking at, how people think about transitioning in the workplace, sort of what the ways are to think about that, how you can have a smooth transition, and then just, what you can do to just have a good attitude about, what's going on as it goes on too.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to success is communication, and it sounds to me like Hannah has been gracious with coworkers who are, people struggle with pronouns when your pronouns change, and we can give them some grace sometimes and make preserve the relationship and keep moving forward.
I always think that you're really gracious with people around pronouns, and I always think that creates that self-actualized experience for you at work. To go back to your opening, I think deciding to do that allows you to decide that you live in a world that's positive too.
Yep.
Well, it's been great being here with you today. Go experiment.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.